Bill is a longtime Montana conservationist. He grew up in Montana. He's worked for the Wilderness Society, for the Montana Wilderness Association, and for American Wildlands. Not only has Bill worked tirelessly to protect Montana's wild places, he's also traveled them quite extensively. I can think of few other folks in the state who have seen the extent of country that Bill has. Bill has written several guidebooks, including Wild Montana, and he also writes a wild country column for Montana Magazine. Bill owns an outfitting business, a backpacking outfitting business in the Bob Marshall, and that's called High Country Adventure. And Bill also teaches university-level wilderness field courses. And so please welcome Bill Cunningham. He's a great person to talk about the 40th anniversary of the Wilderness Act, and we're really lucky to have him here with us.
That's close enough. Well, thank you, Lori. I really appreciate the intro. It's great to be here in Missoula to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the Wilderness Act, a great birthday party this entire month nationwide in different locations celebrating the 40th anniversary of the 1964 Wilderness Act. And I also want to mention, many of you know that we are also celebrating the 80th anniversary of the world's first wilderness area. This is the Gila Wilderness down in southwestern New Mexico. We can thank Aldo Leopold, the author of Sand County Almanac. Many of you have read that wonderful philosophical piece about wild nature by Aldo Leopold, and he was the guiding light and push behind the world's first wilderness down in the Gila. And so 1924, the first formally recognized wilderness, administratively designated. And then 1964, we set up a statutory basis to protect wilderness with the Wilderness Act itself. And then here we are in 2004, celebrating that 40th anniversary. So there's a sort of symmetry there that I think is fun to acknowledge. I should also confess at the outset that the theme, the power of wilderness, was assigned to me by Lori in my absence because after endless telephone tags, she gave up trying to reach me. And I think it's great. Our tape machines talked to one another for a while. And finally she said, oh, well, this will work for Bill. We'll let him talk about the power of wilderness. Frankly, I couldn't have come up with a better theme anyway. I think it's wonderful. I'll run with it. But I might mention that while she was unable to get a hold of me during this formative period of planning the Riverfest today, I was up gallivanting around up in the high Arctic, north of the Arctic Circle, up in what is now the gates of the Arctic National Park, attempting to replicate a little bit of one of the original routes that was done by Bob Marshall himself back in the 1930s when he did some of the original non-native exploration of the Upper Koyukuk. And we were up there rooting around up in that country and enduring some of the same hardships of floodwaters and variable weather and awesome terrain and no trails and an occasional grizzly bear. And it was just an incredible experience to try to follow in Bob Marshall's footsteps. Of course, all of you know that we've got what many people call the flagship of America's wilderness fleet, the Bob Marshall Wilderness, named after Bob Marshall. And I think most of you might recognize the name Bob Marshall as the commanding general of the wilderness battle, so to speak. Inspirational person, full of endless enthusiasm and energy, and we can be very grateful for his vision, the vision that we're celebrating today, the Wilderness Act, and all of the benefits of an enduring resource of wilderness. So back to this idea of the power of wilderness. I sort of had to scratch my head a little bit because when I'm in wilderness, of course, it gives great strength and inspiration. Some of the words earlier today, Bud Moore talking about what wilderness means to him personally. I think Bud was just exuding this sense of power that it gives to him, that wild country, just the realization that wild country can still exist in this fast-paced, ever-shrinking world of ours gives inspiration and power. I think part of the power of wilderness is the power of grassroots democracy and activism, the power of hope. It gives us hope. It gives us optimism. And I think that this power of creating hope is especially important during these times of relative hopelessness. A lot of people are in despair. Things are tough right now. Without going into the specifics of that, I certainly don't need to dwell on that, but I think we all know that all too often hope is the one thing that we find most in short supply. And I think it's interesting to contrast that with the way in which the late author Wallace Stegner defined wilderness as the geography of hope. So if we live in a period of relative hopelessness, if you will, at least as seen by many people, then we can celebrate wilderness as the geography of hope. And I think that's very eloquent, and I think it goes much to the power of wilderness. I think that the power of wilderness is not just the physical geography of untrammeled wild land, the mountains, the vegetation, the animals that live there, but I think it's also there's also a sort of metaphysical power of wilderness, if you will. The power of wilderness to foster hope, then, in the human spirit, a sort of hope that we, as only one of millions of species on this small planet, will have the humility, the restraint, and the foresight to save an enduring resource of wilderness. And this is the essence of the Wilderness Act itself, to save an enduring resource of wilderness. So the power of wilderness to create hope then translates to a conviction that each one of us can make a difference, individually and collectively, but each one of us, one by one, can make a difference. And what greater difference can any of us make than to participate in the democratic process to save a meaningful and ecologically functioning part of our wilderness heritage. I think this is one of the greatest legacies that we can leave to future generations, to those who follow us, and certainly to ourselves while we're still here. This sense of making a difference and participating in the process that was set in motion by the Wilderness Act itself. Now, when we're talking about enduring wilderness, the idea of having wild country, that it will last beyond this generation, beyond the next generation, this concept of enduring, I think it's important to recognize that, at least in terms of the bag of tricks, the tools that we have available to us, this can only be accomplished by means of the Wilderness Act. It's the only statutory permanent system to protect wild land. It's kind of like an insurance policy. If we're truly serious about achieving lasting protection of wilderness, then only the Wilderness Act designation by Congress will get the job done. What I'd like to do is just give you a really quick snapshot of history, a sort of historical perspective, as we celebrate the amazing societal accomplishment that's represented by the National Wilderness Preservation System. And as we reflect upon our personal and collective responsibilities to pass on the wild heritage, our wild heritage, undiminished and enduring forever. And you know something, forever is really a long time, isn't it? It's beyond my rather limited capacity to even understand, and perhaps we mere mortals, we mere humans can't. But the idea of an enduring resource, going back to that. And I think that we in Montana can take a special pride in the wilderness legacy that we've been able to set aside so far, because we in Montana have led the preservation battles, not only in Montana, but nationwide. Most of you have heard the name Howard Zahniser, known affectionately as Zahnie. Zahnie was head of the Wilderness Society back in the 50s and 60s, and he wrote the Wilderness Act, which is not only landmark, monumental, public lands law, but it is also prose. It's literature in of its own right. It's poetic. And when Zahnie was leading the charge to enact the Wilderness Bill into law back in the mid-50s and going into the early 60s, he traveled all over the country, and he often commented that nowhere did he find more support for wilderness and for some kind of a wilderness act than in Montana. It's kind of neat to think about that. In Montana, way back in 1958, 6 years before passage of the Wilderness Act itself, the Montana Wilderness Association was formed as the first statewide grassroots organization, citizens organization, dedicated to preserving wilderness in the nation. This is the first in the nation, 6 years before we even had a wilderness bill itself. And so it's little wonder then that the late U.S. Senator from Montana, Lee Metcalf, who grew up, who was a native of the Bitterroot Valley right next door to Missoula here, it's little wonder that he was one of the very first sponsors of the Wilderness Bill back in 1956 as a young congressman from the West. And believe me, that took a tremendous amount of political courage and will for Lee Metcalf to put his name on that bill and to fight for it in the face of the timber industry and other opposition that existed at that time against having any kind of wilderness legislation. And so, and it's important also, I think, as a side note, to remember the good old days back then when wilderness was a very strongly, broadly bipartisan issue. The key sponsors of the wilderness bills, and there were 66 different wilderness bills during the 8-year period of 56 to 64. The wilderness, those sponsors were Republican, they were Democrat, it didn't make any difference. The original House sponsor was Republican from Pennsylvania, John Saylor. The original Senate sponsor, a Democrat, Hubert Humphrey from Minnesota. So we had this tremendous nationwide bipartisan support for wilderness and for a wilderness bill back in the 50s and 60s. And so I think that again, hopefully we can come back to that so that wilderness isn't viewed just as a quote-unquote democratic issue or just as a quote-unquote environmental issue, because believe me, it took a tremendously broad coalition to enact the wilderness bill into law. It wasn't just the environmental community or the conservation community. It was dude ranch owners and outfitters and ranchers and folks from all walks of life. And that's what we need, I think, to get back to more and more. Bud Moore referred to Hal Zani when he was helping to sow the seeds of dissent and democracy to get the wilderness bill enacted, how he would draw the circle bigger and bigger to encompass more and more people so that no one felt left out, no one was disenfranchised. And maybe that's a skill we need to go back to and learn from. And so, back in after this amazing 8-year legislative battle to bring about the Wilderness Act, I mentioned the 66 versions of the Wilderness Bill, 18 different hearings, and more mail received by members of Congress than any other legislation in our history. After this incredible 8-year period, on September 3rd, 1964, Lyndon Johnson signed the Wilderness Bill into law. And so we can refer to the Wilderness Act as landmark, as monumental, as a milestone, and indeed it's all these things and so much more. For the Act, it's so much more for those of us who share a love for wild nature and a vision for preserving our wild legacy. It gives us that tool to accomplish this. Now, in 1964, as was mentioned previously, by I think both Brandy and Bud, there were 9 million acres of so-called instant wilderness in 54 different areas, all national forests, no other agencies involved in 64, so-called instant wilderness designated with the stroke of a pen under the Wilderness Act. In Montana, our contribution to the fledgling system was the Bob Marshall, the Cabinets, the Gates of the Mountains, the Anaconda Pintler, and the Selway Bitterroot. Certainly all flagship areas, but this was just our initial contribution. But keep in mind, at this time, these were all agency proposals. They had emanated from areas that had been studied and set aside under agency regulations, administrative regulations. These were not citizen proposals. And so the agency proposal process pretty much was the modus operandi up until 1972. And then in 1972, here in Montana, an astounding thing happened. and that is the congressional designation of the Scapegoat Wilderness, 240,000 acres on the south end of the Bob Marshall Wilderness, just in our backyard here up the Blackfoot River out of Missoula, just north of Obando. This became, in 1972 then, the Scapegoat became the first citizen-initiated wilderness in the nation. And that set in motion what I think is the great vision, the great process, and the genius behind the Wilderness Act itself. It set in motion this democratic process of citizens petitioning their members of Congress, putting together sound proposals, and getting legislation introduced, debated through the various processes in Congress and the House and the Senate, and ultimately enacted into law. So but because of this process, that actually became a compromise that Wayne Aspinall of Colorado, the chairman of the House Interior Committee, insisted on. This process is cumbersome, it's unwieldy, it's complicated, it requires the passing of a law in order to set aside an area in the wilderness system. And in that sense, the Wilderness Act, in a way, is a double-edged sword. It's tough to get an area in, but so too is it tough to get an area out. So just as we are kind of like wild salmon swimming up against a swift current to spawn, when we try to swim up against that political current of resistance to save an area of wilderness to get legislation introduced and passed, okay, we have our work cut out for us to pass legislation to protect wilderness, but once it's in the system, there's a tremendous amount of security, and that is one of the main ideas behind the Wilderness Act, is this idea of enduring protection. Hard to get in, but it should equally be very difficult to get out. And so we've not had undesignations, if you will, of wilderness. We get them designated, and then we have to be vigilant to make sure these areas are managed in accordance with the Wilderness Act and its stewardship principles as wilderness, and to make sure that we can continue to add worthy areas, which I'll come to here shortly. So, empowered by the Wilderness Act then, of '64, thousands of citizens in more than 40 states during these past 40 years have participated in our great democracy, have involved themselves in public education, have gone to countless hearings, written countless letters, and have put unrelenting heat on their members of Congress, resulting in a wilderness system today that has grown from the 9 million acres, 54 units in '64, to 106 million acres today, 663 different wilderness areas in all but 6 states. This is a remarkable accomplishment that all of us can be proud of and take great pride in. These agencies, or these areas now, are administered by 4 different federal agencies, not just the Forest Service, as was the case in 1964, but now, in addition to the Forest Service, the National Park Service, the Bureau of Land Management, and the Fish and Wildlife Service. The BLM actually only entered the wilderness stewardship picture in 1976 with passage of the Federal Land Policy Act, and so for 12 years, the BLM wasn't even considered a wilderness management agency. Kind of amazing, considering that the BLM administers more public land than any of the other agencies, maybe than all the other agencies combined, but nonetheless, now that has been rectified. 48 million of these 106 million acres in the wilderness system are in the lower 48. 58 million are in Alaska. And to bring it closer to home, of this wilderness estate, then 3.4 million in 15 different areas are here in Montana. And in addition, we have the Mission Mountains Tribal Wilderness just to the north of us, in many ways managed in a more strict stewardship principle than some of our national forest and other federal public land wilderness areas. So we have 16 counting the tribal wilderness. This amounts to close to 3.5 million acres. 3.7% of Montana is designated as wilderness. That's not a bad start, but compare that to 14% of California is designated as wilderness, and California is obviously a very densely populated state, only slightly larger than Montana, with about 40 times as many people. 14% of California is wilderness. 16% of Alaska is designated as wilderness. So we have a little bit of work yet to do in Montana. We can rest on our laurels up to a point. 3.7 is a good start, but compare Montana if we're just looking at percentages and acres, and there's much more to look at than that, obviously, but compare that then with what's happened elsewhere. Well, wilderness truly is the geography of hope. But wilderness can also be defined as politics. Wilderness is politics. At least big W wilderness as defined in the Wilderness Act and as designated through the processes that are envisioned and set forth in the Wilderness Act. Wilderness is politics, and this is where we rely upon the democratic process that has literally been unleashed in the Wilderness Act. Because keep in mind, and has been mentioned earlier, no longer is wilderness the sole prerogative of the administrative agencies. It is now our prerogative as concerned citizens. We have the power to designate wilderness, and we have, and we do this basically by motivating and activating our members of Congress. But the leadership has to come from the people. Congress follows, Congress does not lead. If the people lead, Congress will follow. If the people fail to provide the leadership, if there's not enough consensus to bring about the political wherewithal to get anything done, you can be assured that nothing is going to happen on the congressional end. So we have much to celebrate, just as we have much to accomplish. I'd like to enumerate a little bit of the unfinished agenda, things that we're still faced with that we need to continue to work on. And I'll just illustrate a few things, I think more just as examples, not necessarily as an exhaustive list of, laundry list, if you will, of unfinished agenda, because I think by definition there will always be some of that. Well, first, I think we need to continue to overwhelmingly oppose an ill-conceived proposal by the industry-oriented Bush administration that would effectively overturn the Clinton roadless rule. The roadless rule protects 58.5 million acres of national forest roadless land nationwide. Coincidentally, this is about the amount of designated wilderness up in Alaska. And it would protect these roadless lands from additional road building and logging, including the last 6 million acres of unprotected roadless land, national forest roadless land in Montana. Now, these lands provide the basis for our current wilderness proposals for protecting that which is unprotected here in Montana. Relative to the roadless rule, 1.6 million Americans, including more than 13,000 Montanans, have already expressed support for retaining our roadless areas. But now we must do it again in letters to the Forest Service prior to the extended deadline of November 15th, in opposition to an ill-advised process that would rely on petitions from the governor of a given state in order to keep an area roadless. This is ludicrous on several fronts. In particular, it ignores the fact that these are national forests, not state forests. National forests are of national interest and belong to all people in the nation and should not be the prerogative of a local governor. So in particular, please keep in mind the need to reinforce support for the roadless rule, and there has been an extended deadline until November 15th. Secondly, while we do have much to celebrate, it's been 21 years since any new wilderness has been designated in Montana. And that was the Lee Metcalf Wilderness in the Madison Range, south of Bozeman, way back in 1983. Some of you weren't even alive in 1983, right? I see a few of you that weren't. So, I mean, we're talking a long time since any wilderness has been formally protected in Montana. It's been 16 years since the last Montana wilderness bill passed Congress, but does anyone remember what happened to that bill? Some of you are nodding your heads. That's when President Reagan vetoed the wilderness bill. It was passed by both houses of Congress 16 years ago, back in 1988. That was tied very closely to the Senate race wherein Democratic Senator John Melcher was defeated by the current Senator Conrad Burns. We've already heard Randy extol the virtues of Brandy, I should say, extol the virtues of Conrad Burns. But the point is that it's been a long time, 16 years since we've passed any kind of wilderness legislation, only to have that vetoed in Montana. That sort of brings us to sort of a good news, bad news kind of a scenario. Start with the good news. The good news is, if you're not losing, you're winning. All right, and we haven't lost a whole lot of the wild country that we revere. Most of our roadless areas are intact. Sure, there's been some chipping away at the edges, nibbling away at the corners here and there, but by and large, because of citizen vigilance, because of alert people that are there with grassroots organizations that have sprung up in defense of various wild areas, we've been able to pretty much hold the line on ill-advised development within our roadless areas. And so, if we haven't lost them, you might say we're winning. And I might mention that in Montana, our unprotected wildlands actually total, in addition to the 6 million acres, or including the 6 million acres of National Forest roadless land that I referred to, the total is closer to 9 million acres of unprotected federal roadless lands in Montana. And there is a potential, incredibly enough, to triple the national wilderness system nationwide by adding an additional 200 million acres. Much of that I shouldn't say in Montana, much of that up in Alaska. Okay, so then we come to the bad news. The bad news is that if you're not winning, you're losing. And we haven't won, right? We've not passed a bill since 1983. And so I guess what I'm trying to say here is that we've got to increase the pressure and or pour on the heat, as Brandy would say, pour on the heat to the people that should be able to take it, because that's why they went to Congress and begged us to support them. Pour on the heat to our 2 U.S. senators and to our lone representative in Congress to bring about protection, lasting protection for qualified areas. Let me give a few examples of some of these. The Great Burn Wilderness. Many of you are very much familiar with the Great Burn country, Fish Creek country, just west of Missoula here, straddling the Bitterroot Divide, going in deep into Idaho, 250,000 acres. One of the premier wild areas in the lower 48. Wildlands along the Rock Creek, Literally a series of wild roadless gems in Rock Creek. Quig Mountain, Stony Mountain, the Sapphire Mountains Wilderness Study Area that connect along the crest of the Sapphires into the Anaconda-Pentler, from the Skakoho to the Big Hole. An incredible expanse of wild country, hundreds of thousands of acres, nearly 400,000 acres in the Sapphires connecting into the Big Hole Valley. The Montana Wilderness Study Act areas that were put into legislated wilderness study status way back in 1977 by the late Senator Metcalf. And right now we have wilderness study areas over 700,000 acres. These are congressional wilderness study areas that have been in limbo since 1977. The West Pioneers, the Big Snowies, the Middle Fork of the Judith, the Gallatin Range, 10 Lakes, Blue Joint, and I've already mentioned the Sapphires, those 7 areas. Congressional wilderness study areas that are to be managed as wilderness until otherwise determined by Congress. Congress has not determined otherwise, but Congress has also not determined. So they sit in a bit of limbo status. And perhaps a front burner that there's a tremendous amount of support for here in Missoula is our revered Rocky Mountain front, the wild east side of the Bob Marshall Wilderness Complex, right in my own backyard. I now live in Choteau, in the shadow of the Rocky Mountain front. And this is very likely, the front is very likely the wildest and yet most threatened wild landscape in the lower 48. A Canadian gas company is proposing 3 wells in an area called the Blind Horse Outstanding Natural Area within the Rocky Mountain front. This Canadian company known as StarTech wants to transform this BLM outstanding natural area into a far less than outstanding natural gas area. We can't let that happen. This is the literally a wildlife Serengeti, and one of the last places where grizzlies still come out on the plains. Well, all of this translates down into a formula often stated by Brock Evans, a great conservationist, who said the formula to bring about saving these threatened wildlands is endless pressure, endlessly applied. If wilderness is to be forever, so too must be our commitment. The power of wilderness, then, is its power to inspire, to motivate, and to activate a diverse and ever-growing constituency. For as Ed Abbey said, wilderness needs no defense, just more defenders. And so as we celebrate the revolutionary, uniquely American idea of passing on unimpaired our last remaining wild areas to future generations, let us also reflect on the wisdom of Henry David Thoreau, which he penned long before anyone had ever even thought of a wilderness bill. In wildness is the preservation of the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, very, very much for that. That was wonderful to hear. We appreciate your enthusiasm and taking the time to come down and help us with this. I'm going to turn this one off. Now, before I introduce our next and final speaker, we want to invite everybody, if they'd like to come out to the Montana Natural History Center out at Fort Missoula. This evening at 8:30, we have the Western Montana Astronomical Association is doing a piece that they call Astronomy Humor. And there really is a lot to laugh about the way certain things are done within the astronomical world. So that's tonight at 8:30 out at Fort Missoula. And again, thank you, Bill. Thank you, everyone, for coming down and supporting us all for the 2004 Riverfest. Now, before this next person comes out, we're going to need everybody to get really, really quiet. Critter Man is a sort of a hermit. Critter Man lives way out in the woods. It's a little weird. He's incredibly shy. And we need to be very, very quiet to entice him to come in.
Thank you.
So if everybody will get real quiet, we'll see if we can get Critter Man to come in.
Scared me. Critter Man is here, but before you get to see a Critter Man show, there is a small price, and that price is one song, and you have to sing it. Should you choose not to sing the song, well, tonight after dark, goes like this. I'm a beaver, you're a beaver, we are beavers. Oh, 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 oh. And when we get together, we do the beaver. Oh, 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 oh. And everybody will do the buck teeth. And there's no executive privilege on this. Ready? I'm a beaver, you're a beaver, we are beavers all. And when we get together, we do the beaver call. Oh, I'm watching. Second verse goes like this. I'm a yellow-bellied sapsucker, you're a yellow-bellied sapsucker, we are yellow-bellied sapsuckers all. And when we get together, we do yellow-bellied sapsucker call. Oh. like to do the motions. So when we get to the part with the motions, you guys do what I do. And if you think you're being set up, you are. Ready? I'm yellow-bellied sapsucker, you're yellow-bellied sapsucker, we're yellow-bellied sapsuckers all. And when we get together, we do yellow-bellied sapsucker call. Oh. You look silly. But you actually did a pretty good job. I was gonna say you barely earned your Critterman show, but you did way better than that. You guys should go like to an outdoor festival or something like that. Yeah, you're kinda into it. I go to get my glitter case. Glitter case. Sometimes you gotta tame them. Oh, much better. Oh, I forgot that was in there. Mickey. Who thinks they might know what that is? Who's got a guess? What? What do you think it is? It's a turtle shell, right? Yeah. What? Here's a hint. What kind of turtle? Snapping turtle. Snapping turtles, some people think are kind of what? Slow and kind of dumb and kind of ugly. But snapping turtles still gotta catch meat for a living. Here's what they do. They take a deep breath, at least the alligator snappers. Take a deep breath, go down to the bottom of the pond, nestle into the mud. Open their mouth wide. On the inside of their mouth, they got a little pink tongue that wiggles and squiggles, and along comes a little fish, and he says, "Oh, look, a worm." And he goes over, Mom, he's gone. So if you are, what? Slow and kind of dumb and kind of ugly, you can always be tricky like the snapping turtle. There's always a way to a healthy self-concept. You know what I mean? Who thinks they might know what this one is? Anybody got a guess? What do you think? What? It's kind of scaly. What? Beaver tail? You should go to school or something. A beaver tails, at least for the beavers, have got, let me see, 4 uses. One of them is not packing mud like on Walt Disney. They pack mud with their front paws. They don't shovel with it neither. Use 1. Beaver goes along on top of the water. Bam, dies. What does that mean in beaver language? What? What? Someone was saying that. Danger, right? Yeah. Use 2. Beaver goes through the water, uses the tail for. What? Rudder. Yeah, some people say swimming, but they swim with their webbed hind feet, but you're right. They do what with the tail? Steer with the tail. Use 3. Wintertime tail gets to be 3 times as thick. Stores. What? Fat. Some of you guys know about that, huh? Yeah, me too. Use number 4. 4. Oh, look at all these people over here, way in the back, trying to hide. Avoiding eye contact. Oh, come here. what's your name?
Lori.
Lori, okay. Now, Lori, oops. Quit whistling, will you? Okay. Lori is what's known as a volunteer. Okay. Come on over this way a little bit. Okay, feet together. Arms way up in the air, don't move. Put them down. Been a long week already, huh? Well, you know, if you're in the wilderness, you know. Okay, put them back up. Tree. Wood. Who am I?
Beaver.
Yeah, beaver. Now, when a beaver goes over to a tree, what's he gonna do? Huh? Chomp. Yeah, he's gonna chew him down, right? Does he lay down on his belly to chew down the tree, at least after he catches it? Or does he lay down his belly to chew it down? Sits up. But if he didn't have a tail, he'd keep right on sitting over backwards. So what he does is goes over to the tree, puts out his kickstand, sits up, and then chews on the tree. It's a trembling aspect. Then the tree falls over. You better crumple or it'll hurt. Falls over. There you go. Then he drags it down to the water. Then he chops it up into little pieces. You better beat it while you can, you think? Yeah. But didn't she do a good job? Thank you. Take a bow. Did a good job with the tree. All right. Okay. Well, since we don't want to leave any child behind, as they say, right? It's time for the test. Huh? But it's an easy one. You guys name the 4 uses loud as I do them. Ready? 1.
Danger.
Yeah, use 2. Yeah, 3. 4. Kickstand. Yeah, you guys got your school funding for another year. Don't yell off the door. Okay, let me see. I think it's now time for the feely bags. Feely bags. Feely bags. Mm-hmm. Yeah, now there's people thinking about going away. Dee-doo-dee-doo. 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 Oops. I'm moving around. Dee-doo-dee-doo. Dee-doo-dee-doo. Dee-doo-doo. Get out of here, she says. Come here. What's your name? Heather, come on over here. We're gonna stay down low down here. Scared me. Okay, now here's how this works. Heather is gonna, being the brave person that she is, she's gonna reach way down the bottom of the bag. Feel what's down there, describe it to you guys, and you guys gotta guess what it is. Are you ready? It can't hurt you, I can guarantee that. Okay? Okay. Now, are you scared? No. No? You gotta go potty? No. Good. Okay, you can do this. This is real easy. I'm gonna, which hand do you like the best, by the way? Which one do you write with? Oh, you better use the other one. You ready? Okay, gotta reach in slow. But don't worry about it. You can't cheat. You can't look, that's cheating. It's okay, you can do it. No, afraid not. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. It's okay. I'm just kidding. It's impossible. Can't hurt you. It's not possible. So it's not even that creepy. You know what it is? You can't tell them what it is. You got to describe it.
Did you see it already by accident? Okay, has it got hair on it?
Yeah.
Okay, coarse hair like that or fine hair like that? It's coarse, huh? Okay, wait a minute. What's this? Is it alive or dead? Dead. You killed it. Is it a whole critter or part of one? Huh? Part of one? Huh? What part do you think it is? The foot. It's kind of big, right? Yeah, claws, coarse fur. Who's got a guess? What? What do you think? It's pretty big. You want me to come back to you? A what? A giant foot? I don't think so. I don't know any giants that at least I haven't seen any parts of any giants. This is pretty big critter though. Any of you guys got a guess back there? What do you think? What? Bigger than that? What? Smaller than that. But you're really close with the Grizz answer. Like really close. Huh? This is what you wear when you go to the beach barefoot. Black or Grizz? Yeah, because it's black. Can be black cub grizzlies, but the reason you can tell right away is the claws, right? Short and curved, because black bears use them for climbing, and Grizz have long straight ones. They use them for digging, right? Yeah. It took a lot of courage. She didn't quite do it, but she took a lot of courage to stand up here and tell me that she didn't want to do it. Yeah, could have been intimidating. Thanks for the help, Heather. Did a good job. Now, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but bears are wild animals. Right? And wild animals are much stronger than you think, right? Aren't they? What do you think? Aren't they? Much stronger. What do you think? Huh? Okay. Now, how many people ever heard of Lake Superior? Huh? Okay. They got a town by Lake Superior with a dump by the town. Bears come out every day in the summertime feeding on the garbage. Oh boy, garbage, yup. Along comes a guy in his, well back then it was a station wagon, be a SUV now. And station wagon rolls down the window, oh look at a neat bear, click, click, click. As this 5-year-old kid get out of the car with a bag of marshmallows. Goes over to the bear, starts feeding the bear. Critterman says, kid, get back in the car. Back in the car. If he had run out of marshmallows, the bear may not have understood. If he had not understood, he may have gone, whoa. If he had gone, whoa, the kid's head would have gone, ba-dip. Wild animals are stronger than you. They took 6 guys the size of Critterman to put one little yearling deer in a cage. 6 guys to hold him down. How many? Oh, maybe not that big. How many people ever heard of Steve the Crocodile Hunter? Huh? Some of you guys have heard on TV. Every week he comes on TV, says crikey's about 85 times, right? Yeah. Well, long time ago, we had the first animal show not having to do with Steve the Crocodile Hunter. This was called the very first one. We'll see how many old codgers we got here. Wild Kingdom, yeah. And the first host of Wild Kingdom was Marlin Perkins. You guys really are old. And Marlin Perkins, instead of saying crikey's, he'd come on TV every week, he'd say, speaking of protection, Mutual of Omaha, right? Yeah, well, he's not as dumb as he looked on TV. He used to be the boss of the St. Louis Zoo in Missouri, and at the zoo they had a whole cage full of chimpanzees. chimpanzees, right? Yeah, little guys about the size of a first grader, right? Yeah, and on the outside of the chimpanzee cage, they had this thing they called the arm wrestling machine. You grab a bar, you push it down, big dial says how many pounds you can push arm wrestling. You with me so far? Okay. They're avoiding eye contact. Oh, this is an easy one to do. Come on up and help me, okay? I won't drag you across the floor or anything. Okay, what's your name? Colleen. Come on up here, Colleen. Okay. This is, she's going to help you out. You guys remember the story, don't you? Chimpanzees, zoo, arm wrestling machine, right? Well, some of these guys who lived down in St. Louis where the zoo was had hang on a second here. Had nothing to do all week long except pumping iron, lifting weights. Couple of years of doing that, you get arms look like legs, right? Kind of big. Walk like this, sharpen a pencil, you gotta go. You know the kind of guy, right? These guys would come into the zoo, girlfriend hanging on the arm, feeling the muscle. What do you think, baby? Huh? And goes over to the chimpanzee cage. Big sign above that machine says, test your strength. Okay, I'm going to read it. Hooked on phonics. What does it say? I know what it is. It's test your strength. He'd think about it for about 5 minutes. She was carrying him. It's kind of usual for a woman to carry a guy, you know. And he'd think about it for about 5 minutes and say, hey, baby, watch this for a second. Let go of me for a second. He goes over to that machine, grabs the bar, puts his elbow down in the cup, pushes as hard as he can. 150 pounds on the dial. Strong. But then the chimpanzees were trained to do the same thing from the inside of the cage. Boom! 300 pounds. So, the girlfriend married the chimp and lived happily ever after. Thanks very much, Claire. I appreciate your help. Did a good job. Thank you very much. Yeah. Wild animals are stronger than you. Yeah, wild animals don't sit on their butts listening to Critter Man shows. They work for a living. And they all work barefoot. Beanie Bag 2 is kind of a special beanie bag. Gotta be quiet for this one. Some people think because they sit way in the back, they won't be chosen. Some people even think because they sit way in the back, what are you moving away for? Way in the back, and are male, they won't be chosen. Some people even think because they sit way in the back, are male, and are sort of peripherally involved, they won't be chosen. Not anymore. Okay, come on up here. Adam, okay. The original man, here he is. Yeah. Okay. Now, I'm going to check this one out first, make sure it's okay. Okay. I got liability to consider, you know. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to arrange him so he doesn't get stung. He's kind of, as you might well imagine, cool Dave, very sedentary right now, yeah. You probably know what I'm talking about. Okay. See if I can get him here. Oops, he's moving around a little, but not much. Okay, I got him, I think. Ah! Here, you better do it. Wait a minute, I was just kidding. I've got the head really well. I had it from the beginning. And you go way down the bottom of the long bag and back by my elbow, you'll be fine. Just feel it and tell them what you feel. You can't look though. Get over here. Yeah? Way down to the bottom and then back toward that way. You find him? Yeah. You better turn around so she can get that. Hey. Hey. Okay, you can let go. Kind of slimy, huh? Yeah. What? Must be a what? Must be a snake? I got a test. If you think snakes are slimy, here's what you do. You take a shoebox, like a little box, like the Air Cobies come in, maybe, right? At least till after the civil trial, right? And you put some sand in it, like from a sandbox or the beach. Have somebody grab a little garter snake. You've seen them, right? Yeah. Let them crawl around the box, pick them up, full of sand, sticks to the slide, right?
Sure.
No. No, of course not. No, he's dry as a bone, not a grain of sand on him. But then the test isn't over. Then you take your hand and you put it palm down in the sand, and you pick it up, and you look at it, and it'll show you who's slimy and who is not. Mm-hmm. This slimy critter's not the snake. You might even like him. See if I can get him out of here. You go, got away! Oh no! It's... Oh, wait a minute. It's even a dead rubber hose. But it took a lot of courage to reach in the snake bag, didn't it? Nice going at it. Yeah, did a good job. Yeah. Well, why did I put that in there? Oh, I remember Critterman's second favorite critter after the beaver is a snake about the same size as this hose, kind of big. First time Critterman ever saw one of these snakes was in a place called Eastern Montana. That's what it is. Yeah, and it was a hot sunny day. Critterman was bopping through the tall grass. Okay, I'll be the Critterman. I am the Critterman. Coincidence. Bopping. Do, 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 do. What up, yo? Do, 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 do. Oh, for some of you older guys, here we go. Do, 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 do. Oh, look at the neat snake. He's big. I'm gonna pet him. I reached down. He reared up, spread his neck out flat, went Critterman jumped back. What do you think? Because he knew that he was dead. A cobra had escaped from the zoo. He's gonna bite me. I'm gonna die. Not. It was only a snake we call a hog-nosed snake. Kind of a pig nose, flat nose. Hog-nosed snakes don't even hardly have teeth. They eat toads for a living. They gotta gum them to death. I wasn't scared. I was cool through the whole thing. Cool. Quiet. Snake was still sitting there flat neck looking at me faking. I reached down and poked him right in the nose. Snake, flat neck, yup. Poked him again, yup. Poked him again. Snake looks up, says, this isn't working. Rolls on his back, opens his mouth, sticks out his tongue, goes, bleh. I killed him. I was just touching him and picked him up by the tail, went like this. He went, he's dead. I put him back down on his belly. And he looked up and he said, I don't look dead enough. This way, flip on his back. Put him on his belly, flip on his back. Oh, he's faking. Belly back, belly back, back. Not to be confused with baby back, that's different. Yeah. Belly back, belly back. By that time, Critter Man was flipping back and forth himself in the grass, laughing. Those guys, those hog-nosed snakes, some people think they're kind of slow and kind of, what? Dumb and kind of ugly, but they keep forgetting that because they got the greatest act in the whole world. And they do eat, who? Who remembers? Toads, right. How many people have ever seen a dog eat a toad? This is what happens. I'll beat a dog looking for a toad. Arf, arf, arf. You know that kind of dog, right? Yeah. Oh boy, a toad. I'm going to eat him. Chomp. Toads are really, what? Slow and kind of dumb and pretty ugly. But toads keep from getting it because toads taste terrible. They've got 2 poison glands in their back, those 2 big bumps. If the dog swallowed the toad, it could kill him. Which reminds me, when you guys handle a toad, make sure that you wash your hands afterwards. Not because of warts. You don't get warts from toads. But if you don't wash your hands and you rub your eye or you pick your nose like those guys been doing right there, you get an itch like poison ivy wherever it's wet, like in your mouth. Doesn't go away for a couple of weeks. That's true. Yeah, it's not much fun. Now, Critter Man's 3rd favorite critter happens to be the toad. Every time I see one, I pick him up and pet him on the warts. Isn't he cute? This toad just went potty in my hand. Why would the toad go potty in the Critter Man's hand? I'll tell you why. Because if a 17,000-pound critter, you know that's T-Rex size, right? Yeah, came over to you, and picked you up by the hind leg, what might you do? I would go potty. Yeah, he's scared, that's why. Critter Man's last critter. You guys may be somewhere around here. Oh, it's around me. Anybody know what that is? Anybody know? It's too big for a coyote. It must be a wolf. Yeah, but actually it's the outside of a wolf. It's if it was a whole wolf, I would be in a bad place right now. And so it's actually a pup wolf. That's why you got confused. It got run over by a car a long time ago. Not to be confused with a full-grown wolf, which is big. This one unfortunately got into a little bit of trouble with sheep. Yeah. Must have been watching the Cowboys probably. Yeah. And it's big, which reminds me, up in places like northern Montana and Idaho and Minnesota, yeah, there, don't you know, and Wisconsin there, hey, and then there's Michigan, all those places have wolves. Oh, then there's the big one, well, duh to you too. Canada, there's wolves all those places, right? And every year, on average, in a normal year, wolves eat 363 people on the average, right? You know? 222. Couple dozen. Oh, that's right. Critter Man had his facts confused, didn't he? Now, they don't eat people. Here's what they do. They wait for a little girl with a red cape on to go bopping through the woods, right? Hmm? You're laughing. Is that a fairy tale? You go to Grandma's house, yeah. You telling me that's a fairy tale? Ah, I know what they do then. They go through the woods, they find a house, couple pigs live in it. That's a fairy tale too? Don't eat people, riding woods, three little pigs. Oh, oh, that's right. You're right. In fact, you know, how many people you think they've been eaten by wolves in North America, as far as we know, in the last couple hundred years? What's your guess? Actually, there's been 2 that were eaten, but none that were killed and eaten. 2 of them were fed on up in the Northwest Territory, a couple of frozen carcasses one time. But that's it. It's like the wolves and the humans got this truce, right? But I'm trying to remember what they do. I don't know. Should I sing you guys a song? Do we have time for that? Huh? This is because the wolves have been hearing all this stuff about Riding Hood and Teenage Werewolf in Paris and all this stuff. And I'm telling you right now, they're sick of it. They're sick of people wearing garlic around their neck in a full moon. Okay? They're sick of it. And so they commissioned the Critter Man to tell their story from their point of view. So you got to pretend I'm a wolf talking now. What I'm going to do for you is called the Riding Hood Rap. It's a little hip hop. Huh? You guys could be the DJs if you want to. You know? Whatever. Keep the time. And it goes like this. I'm the wolf. Well, I was walking down a trail late one night, just sniffing for rodents in the pale moonlight. Into my nose comes this terrible smell, perfume and garlic. Didn't mix too well, you can't trust no one. So I hid behind a tree, skipping up the path. These eyes did see this jumpy woman in a little red cape. I turned around quick to make my escape, but I stubbed my toe and I turned around. Her little blue eyes got big and round, embarrassed. I smiled and stepped off the path. She said, "What big teeth you have?" I said, "You shouldn't be out so late," but she turned and ran through the garden gate, screaming, "It's a wolf, he'll eat me alive!" I said, "Baby, don't give me that jive. With all that garlic around your neck, you're going to need a deodorant check. Besides, I don't ever eat your kind. Go after a human, I'd be out of my mind." She still screamed and wailed at the top of her lungs. Then a low voice says, "Let's go get the guns." That events coincidental had happened in a chain. I was just walking by, and that's not a sin. Not by the hair of our chinny chin chin. So I tried to be anonymous and dressed like a sheep. My tail stuck out, and they said, "That's the creep. There's only one way to keep the wolf from your door." Shot silver bullets, and they shot some more. Oh, 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 oh. What'd I do? Well, since that time, it's gone from bad to worse. Almost like I was some kind of curse. They talk about werewolves. They talk about the moon. They stay inside when the wolf bane blooms. They're crying wolf, wolfing food till they turn blue. Making stories about Peter and Teen Wolf 2 and being thrown to the wolves is a terrible thing. And I still just mind my business and sing. Ooh, 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 ooh. What'd I do? Ooh, 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 ooh. There it is. Ooh, there it is. Ooh, there it is. That's the story from the wolf's point of view. Well, somebody else. I'm trying to remember their favorite food. Let me see, what is it? What's their favorite food? Really? Chicken? Well, it tastes like chicken, but it's the what? Elk is their second favorite food because they're a little big and hard to kill. Moose are real hard to kill. But their favorite food, deer. That's what I was trying to think of. You should be a kid of a naturalist or something like that. Yeah. Deer, right? And you know who else is after a deer right about now in Montana? Yeah, hunters. Yeah, Critterman knows. Give me a hunter too. This is what happens up up there where they've got, who's this? Deer, and who's this? Hunters, and who's that? Yep, I'll be the hunter sneaking along looking for a deer. Shh, it's the woods. Gotta be quiet. Hunter comes to a place where there's a leg, a stomach, a brain, deer, and he says, look at that. There it is, my deer, and that wolf ate it. What a waste. He says that, Critter Man tells him a couple things. First one's a question I'm going to ask you guys. Okay, be honest. Who would you, if you were a deer, who would you rather belong to, the hunter or the wolf? Huh? The wolf? The hunter? Yeah, that's my answer too. I'd rather belong to neither one. Because you'd be dead if you did, right? See, whoever catches the deer, who earned it, is who gets to eat it. That's the way it works, really. And nobody owns nothing ahead of time. Last I heard, the deer owned themselves. Last I heard. Yeah. Second thing I tell him when he says, what a waste, is a short story that happened to the Critter Man a long time ago, before some of you guys were born. Northern Minnesota. Yeah. And it was late March. It'd been snowing all night long. New foot of wet, sticky snowman snow on the ground. Sticky stuff. About that deep. Critter Man starts walking back in the woods off Highway 1, the last road before Canada, at about 6 in the morning when the snow quits. Walks back in the woods for a couple of hours, to about 8 o'clock. Comes to a place where there is, see if you can guess, moose. Yep, that was dead. Had been killed by the wolves. Had been killed a couple weeks before Critter Man got there. Smelled a couple weeks old. A little bit of meat left around the head and ears. Rest was bare bone. You could tell it was a wolf kill because even the big leg bones on the moose crushed. Nobody else can do that. They got the jaws. There was tracks in the snow, which was fresh, 2 hours old. Not wolf tracks. See, wolves eat for a couple of weeks and then they go away, or a couple of days, and then they get jumpy. These were tracks of critters called scavengers, that's what it is, yeah. Scavengers. And they were critters that clean up later. I'll name the tracks that were there. There were fisher tracks. There were pine marten tracks. There were fox, weasel, chickadee, blue jay tracks, gray jay, raven, bald eagle tracks. How many is that? 9 kinds of critters had been feeding on that so-called waste in only 2 hours. What it told me is that out in the woods there is no such thing as waste. Only one critter I know knows how to make that stuff. No such thing as waste, because even if the scavengers didn't eat the moose, it would always rot. And when it rots, it becomes new dirt. And out of that new dirt grows new trees, and then along comes new moose to nibble on the new trees, and then along comes new hunters and new wolves to nibble on the new moose. And sooner or later, all of them die. They become new dirt, new trees, new moose. See how it works? It's a big circle. Something's always got to die so something else can live. And every critter I can think of has got a place in that big circle, except for maybe wood ticks. I'm not too sure about that. So when you guys see an ugly looking bug crawling across the floor, bzz, 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 don't automatically go, you icky, because that bug could be the same bug that helps the clover and the hay to grow. Bzz. Clover that the cows eat. Cows that we eat at McDonald's. Huh? Hard to understand how an ugly little bug can help to keep us alive. That's the way it works. Because everybody out in the woods, everybody in here on the chairs, everybody is, always was, always will be connected to everybody else. Start thinking you're real important compared to those animals. And you got to remember, there's one kind of critter I can think of that big circle could probably do without and be just fine. That one's got 2 legs, walks to school, drives to festivals. Start thinking you're real important. You got to remember, those critters have been out in the woods since way before the first people. I think it was probably the Kootenays or the Salish right here. Yeah, before the first people got here, there was critters out there doing their thing. So do they need us? Never have. But when you think about the connections, maybe we do need them. One more thing. You guys go outside tonight. Make sure that you walk in groups of at least 6. And when you hear a noise in the bushes, off to the left or to the right, take the smallest one in the group, push them toward the sound and run the other way. Because if you don't, you may have to deal with the critter man. And if you see him,
don't ever come in.
thanks for listening to me. I know we're running late for the radio station. See you later.